I'm a big believer in facing the truth. I would rather be hurt by the truth than blinded by bullshit. I've always been that way. And I had an NT wife email me today as well. You know, you could use neurodiverse instead of autism spectrum disorder because, you know, these guys are sensitive, and I think that they, you know, my husband is real sensitive, and he doesn't want to, you know, admit that he might have this disorder. And so you've heard of this term, right? Neurodiverse, and it, you know, it's a politically correct term, and it would, you know, be a little more sensitive. So duly noted, but I don't think you guys are that fragile that I have to be. I'm not really into being politically correct. Plus, I use neurodiversity to describe the couples. When I say neurodiverse couples, I mean one has autism, one does not. So the reason I'm not willing to use neurodiverse for you guys is because there's no shame involved. To use neurodiverse to kind of sugarcoat it a little bit implies that there's something to be ashamed of. No. Period. ASD level 1 is what we're referring to now. There's 2 other levels. It has to do with levels of functioning. You're already aware of that. You guys are all ASD level 1, which is high functioning. So think of ASD level 1 as simply I don't like the term disorder, though, I will tell you that. Because there again, that sounds like there's something wrong or bad or to be ashamed of. So I do not like the term disorder. So I guess I do want to be politically correct on that. I prefer to call it a condition or a different way of thinking because I think that's more in alignment with the reality of things. And you could think of it as a condition of social skills being low, social needs being low, logic being high. And that's kind of your saving grace. That is your strength, your logic. We wouldn't have this computer we're talking on right now if we didn't have somebody on the autism spectrum, Asperger's syndrome, and back in that day, Bill Gates. The engineering field is full of people on the spectrum. Computer sciences, they're all over the place. It's almost a stretch to call you guys in the minority because there's so many undiagnosed people crawling around all over the planet. If we could get to the bottom of things, we might find that 30% or 40% of people, the entire people on the planet, are on the spectrum. That sounds like a bizarre exaggeration. It's not, because there's a lot of people that have these traits, but nobody has put 2 and 2 together yet or done some research and thought, hey, maybe you have this thing called ASD level 1. They just go on with life and they don't even entertain the idea. So there's more people that have it than have been diagnosed with it or that even have talked about it. So what's going on here, guys, is, and this sounds a little accusatory, but it's not meant to be. Because of some of the social and emotional challenges that you haven't met a lot of her expectations or her desire for the emotional reciprocity to the degree that she wants. And it's a little bit like a cancer has developed in the relationship. So if you had cancer or you know somebody who has cancer, there's a long recovery. There's surgery to remove the tumor. There could be radiation, chemotherapy, all of these different things, and it could be 6 months or a year or more before you're clean, before you go back to the doc and said, yeah, we can't find one cancer cell in your body. For now, you're good to go. You beat it. You're done. That's a long-ass process. All of you all in here are right in the middle of that process, and you're just now beginning treatment. So when you feel like it, well, doesn't matter what I'm doing, it's never good enough. Doesn't matter what I say, I'm always wrong. I'm using these strategies that I learned, and it doesn't feel like things are getting better. You got to realize that this is a long haul deal here. So don't lose your confidence. If you're doing the strategies that we're talking about, you should notice some improvement immediately. But to get it to the level where you want it, where she's no longer agitated and giving you a bunch of grief, that's going to take a long time. Passivity is, I'm afraid that I'm going to say or do something wrong, so I'm going to try to say and do as little as possible. Anything to keep the peace. We don't want to work that way anymore. Aggressiveness would be, she's upset with me, she's nagging me, this makes me very anxious, and now my anxiety is coming out as anger and rage. We don't want that anymore. So we're trying to get into the middle, and that's going to be assertiveness. What she wants more than anything from you is to be empathic, but empathy is incompatible with shutdowns and or meltdowns. Let me repeat this. She's wanting empathy from you, and you're not going to be able to deliver if you're jumping back and forth between passivity and aggressive. So you have to be assertive before you can practice empathy. So APV, don't forget that little acronym right there. Active listening is the A part, and that involves looking in her direction, nodding as she is talking, and also, I should have put this first, you stop what you're doing. So the active listening piece, you stop what you're doing, get off the computer, put your phone down, whatever you're doing, you stop that. You look in her direction, and you nod as she talks. So that's A. The next one was P, which is for paraphrase. And paraphrase simply means repeat in your words. You're going to repeat what she said briefly in summary fashion using your words. And the reason that the paraphrasing piece is important is because sometimes, I'm not necessarily accusing anybody in here of doing this, but sometimes you perhaps gave her the illusion that you were listening. And later on, she found out that you really weren't listening and that you didn't get it. So if you paraphrase back using your words what she said, that by default means you must have gotten the message, because you wouldn't be able to run it through your filter if you hadn't got the message. Now, if you say, well, honey, what I hear you saying is blah, 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 and she goes, no, that's not what I'm saying, then you can ask her to, well, would you mind rewording that then so I can get it? And then she can reword it, and then you can paraphrase it again. And then she'll go, yeah, that's what I mean. So that's the P in APV. And then there's the validation, which simply means I respect, I understand. So that's the validation piece. And you can even say, okay, well, I understand what you're saying, and I respect the fact that that's your truth. And that is validation. You can throw in there if you want, depending on how safe it is and how much she receives or doesn't receive this next line. You can say, that's not necessarily the way I see it, but I'm not here to defend my opinion or to mount a defense or to make you wrong. I'm here to understand your side of things. So let me repeat all of this again. And this was a long way around the bush to kind of tie in to answer Tim's question about, is it okay to fake empathy? She seems to want emotional mirroring. Okay, emotional mirroring is not part of this formula. There's just three components: the active listening, the paraphrase, and validation. So I'm going to summarize this. Emotional mirroring is not in here, but it doesn't matter, because this still is, she wants emotional reciprocity. So if you do APV, she's getting emotional reciprocity, and you don't have to fake it. So she's talking, you're going to stop what you're doing, you're going to look in her direction and nod. That's the active listening. Then you're going to paraphrase back what she said using your words. The reason that's important because now she will know that A, he listened to me, and B, he understood what I said because he just used his words to say what I said. You wouldn't be able to do that if you didn't get it. And then thirdly, there's validation, and that is, okay, honey, I understand what you're saying, and I respect that that's your perspective on it. That's not necessarily how I see it, but I'm not here to defend my opinion. I'm here to understand your opinion on it. That is validation. And this APV business is by default a very staunch form of empathy. She wants emotional reciprocity, she being the NT wife, neurotypical. But in pretty much all cases, and I work with men only, women only, groups of couples only. I have all the demographics covered, all the bases covered. And in almost all cases, the NT wife's approach to try to get you to be emotionally reciprocal ends up raising your anxiety such that you want to just disconnect from her, purely for anxiety reduction purposes, which yields the opposite result of what she's trying to do. And I'm not trying to blame anybody, but I will go on record as saying that her method of getting you to be a team player and getting you to connect and be more empathic and affectionate, her method of going about that has in too many cases driven you away, which makes, not to blame her, I mean, you have your share, you're contributing to the issues as well, but when you pull away, and in many cases, I got to tell you guys, in many cases, she has become his number one source of anxiety. She's come that far up in status as she is now my number one source of anxiety. I mean, I'm not saying that connecting with her is not important to you. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying her need for the connection is more important to her than it is you. And if she were here, she would say, you don't provide enough emotional reciprocity, that you don't listen. I'm just going to make some things up that you've probably heard. You don't listen, you don't empathize, you don't validate me, and so on and so on. You've probably heard it all many times before. And so if this has gone on for years and years and years, you may have experienced this too. She is super resentful and angry, and maybe even at some level revengeful. And so what has happened, and I'm not blaming you guys, you're wired the way that you're wired. There's nothing wrong with you. It is what it is. But by virtue of your supposed lack of empathy and her heightened resentment, we're going to call that a cancer in the relationship. So you guys, most of you are experiencing a relationship cancer right now, and you're in the middle. You've just begun treatment last week. Last Wednesday, you just began treatment. And so the whole point of this conversation is that you can, as much as I almost hate to say it, because it sounds kind of disconcerting at some level, you guys are in for the long haul. You have to be in for the long haul. This is not something we're going to resolve in a few weeks of meeting here. You're going to have to apply the assignments that we talk about. You're going to have to be consistent with it. And she is going to have to see some significant change. So there's actually going to be three things. It's going to have to be significant change. In other words, something that really stands out in her attention. It's going to have to be consistent change. In other words, change that remains consistent over time. And with those two things, a fairly radical change that she views consistent over time, then and only then will she begin to reduce her resentment level. Right now, it's most likely that many of you guys are experiencing the thing where her heart is cold as ice. And she probably has lost trust. She's probably given up hope in some cases. And she's also probably reluctant to give you the benefit of the doubt so early, even if she does witness some significant change, because if she were here, she would say, well, I know there's been times before when he's changed, supposedly changed, but it never lasted very long. And, it was just a matter of time before he went back to his old ways. So even if she saw some consistent change in you, a significant change in your empathy level, we'll say, she still wouldn't be necessarily willing to acknowledge it, because she would be concerned that if I start having hope again and he lets me down again, I'm not sure I can handle it. So she may even be withholding affection or acknowledgement or praise or pointing out that you're actually doing something right for fear of being let down again. So everybody in here is in for a long haul deal. You have to be willing to tough this out and realize that this fix, for the lack of a better term, is not going to happen anytime soon. That's not to say you wouldn't see some improvement if you're doing the assignments. You should be able to see some improvement in her response to you, but it's not going to be anything real super observable or noticeable for quite a while, because again, she's going to have to see significant change, and she's going to have to see that spread out over the course of the next several months before she's going to have a change in attitude. And that change of attitude in her mind would be, you know what, he is making some significant changes, and he has been consistently doing so over the last 3 or 4 months. Maybe he really has turned the corner. If you have ASD level 1, you will have some of these executive function deficits. I'm not going to sugarcoat my words with you guys. I'm not going to call ASD a condition or a different way of thinking. You have to have some thick skin if you're going to work with me. So I'm not going to be politically correct. So you're not going to have all of these, but you can have more than one. If he has a hard time understanding nonverbal language, voice inflection, body language, that would be an abstract thinking deficit. If he has periodic meltdowns or shutdowns, that would be an emotional control deficit. I want to make sure you understand the difference between a meltdown and a shutdown. With a true meltdown, your prefrontal cortex is shutting down, and your amygdala, the fight or flight response of the brain, is now on front stage. And it's flooding you with adrenaline and cortisol, fight or flight chemicals. And with a true meltdown, let's assume it's in the context of her trying to talk to you, especially about a heavyweight topic, while she's angry, you are only going to be able to. You won't be able to will yourself into a different state of mind. You will only be able to listen to maybe 8% of what she's saying, and only understand 60% of that, and only retain 40% of that, and maybe only follow through with 20% of what she's asking. So in a full-blown meltdown moment, she is wasting her time and energy with you. That's why we need to have the conversation about prevention. Because intervening in the middle of a meltdown, that bullet's already left the gun. That storm is going to have to ride itself out. So when we're talking about meltdowns, we have to think in terms of prevention. What is a shutdown? That is simply his catching it early that he's escalating towards a meltdown, and he leaves to prevent a meltdown. I'm going to just give you a brief overview of why some of the traits of ASD level 1 cause a problem in the relationship. With true dyed-in-the-wool ASD level 1, it is a developmental disorder, and that's the key term. What does that mean, developmental? It means that the social emotional portion of the brain is underdeveloped relative to the logical part of the brain. So if you have ASD level 1, you're somewhat low in social and emotional intelligence. That doesn't mean that you don't have social skills or that you don't have empathy, although she may argue that point. But it does mean that you are low in social and emotional needs, which is paramount. And I like to use the analogy of an eagle versus a chicken. An eagle has wings, uses them often, needs them to survive. If the eagle did not have wings, it would not survive. A chicken has wings, and it could fly, maybe 5 feet, but it has to run and jump, and it might fly for 5 to 10 feet. But it doesn't need wings to survive. Both of them have wings. Okay? So, if you are low in social and emotional intelligence, you are also by default low in social and emotional needs. You don't necessarily, I'm generalizing here, I'm guessing most of the guys in here, they're not really that interested in talking about feelings, how they feel. They may be out of touch about, for the most part, how they feel. They're really out of touch about how she feels most of the time. And when she starts talking about feelings, it is kind of uncomfortable and abstract conversation, especially if she says, well, honey, I feel this way about such and such, and she's expecting you to take how she feels and then apply it to some course of action you're supposed to take. That's really confusing as well. Now, I said low in social and emotional intelligence, and I'm also saying high in logic, but sometimes the logic is a bit too high. If you have an overly logical brain, you have a brain that is an overthinking brain that tends to get stuck on one detail, hyper-focused on one detail and fails to see the big picture, hard to generalize, those types of things. So that, in a worst case scenario, you have a high logical brain that's almost an overthinking brain, and you're low in social and emotional intelligence. Now you take her, the NT wife, you have damn near the 180-degree opposite scenario. So you can see immediately why we have this problem. She is high in social and emotional intelligence. She's not as high in logic as you, but she has logic, of course, but it's not up there with you. But she has a lot of social emotional intelligence, and by default, she has what? A lot of social and emotional needs. She is the eagle that has to use those damn wings to survive. Chicken, you could chop a chicken's wings off. He would be fine. I'm missing my wings, but I can still do what I want to do. She has to have her social and emotional needs met to a significant degree, or she is going to do what your wife has done. She's going to complain. She's going to get angry. She's going to be hurt. She's going to talk to you about how she's emotionally deprived and has Cassandra syndrome, and Lord only knows what else she has thrown at you. So this is why we have that dilemma. So the moral to this little speech is it shouldn't be a big surprise to you why there's conflict. And nobody is doing anything wrong. You aren't bad people in here that are behaving badly, and you're purposely trying to be selfish, insensitive, uncaring, narcissistic, sociopathic, and whatever other things she's called you. I'm guessing that the vast majority, if not everybody in here, wants to make her happy. You really wanted to make her happy. You tried to do right, but what I've run into with guys on the spectrum is they haven't quite figured out how to get that done, and they often say, it doesn't matter what I say or do, it's never good enough. And honestly, they're tired of being a failure. And they're tired of hurting her. And so what ends up happening is they kind of start disconnecting. Because, if you're no good at basketball, and every time you get out there on the court, you're an embarrassment to the team, eventually you go, this, and you sit on the bench. So if you really suck at having that strong emotional reciprocity that your super intelligent in the social and emotional sense wife has, and you can never quite get up there, at an unconscious level, or maybe even a conscious level, you kind of lose hope, and you've kind of lost faith in yourself. Your confidence is in the toilet. Your self-esteem is probably in the toilet. And you almost feel like you're better off just to mind your own business because it's too much trouble. Some of the traits of the disorder look like selfishness, insensitivity, narcissism. She attaches negative motives to the things that you say and do. Because he said this or did that, or because he didn't say what I wanted him to say or didn't do what I wanted him to do, therefore he doesn't give a shit about the relationship. Or his work is more important than me. Or his special interest, he's married to his special interest, not so much me. I'm not important to him. She fills in the blanks with that stuff, which keeps you perpetually in the doghouse. So that is kind of like I felt like I needed to lay some groundwork down to let you know why you're in the position, approximately why you're in the position that you're in, but also to validate that you're not a bad guy. Although some of you aren't convinced of that. There's a big difference between healthy guilt and toxic guilt. Healthy guilt is, I seem to say the wrong thing sometimes, and I don't follow through like she wants me to sometimes, and that's a mistake. I intend to do better. That's just healthy guilt. There's nothing wrong with that. But some of the guys in here have made the leap from healthy guilt to toxic guilt, and that is, I'm always messing up. I never get it right. I'm always doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing, or I'm supposed to be doing or saying something, and I never do that. And I'm always failing her, And that toxic guilt leads to toxic shame. Because I'm a social failure in her eyes, therefore I'm a failure as a person. In other words, because I supposedly do all these bad things, therefore I am a bad person. And I run into guys on the spectrum that they are there with the toxic shame, that they really believe that at their core they're flawed, defective somehow, which really makes it almost impossible to have a relationship with her, because if you've gone that far, you've convinced yourself that there's no use in trying. When I try, it's not even a neutral thing. If I try, I make it worse. And so a lot of you have stopped trying. And of course, just like I said a minute ago, she makes the false assumption that he stopped trying because he doesn't care about the relationship, when that's not the case. I can help you understand her anger and resentment and complaining. When she was young, a young girl, she's playing with dolls, she's playing house, she's pretending like she's married, she's all these fantasy things and childlike play revolve from a very young age. As you know, if you've raised any daughters, she's already gearing up for her big day, marriage. She's already gearing up for, I'm a princess and I'm going to find my prince and I'm going to have babies. We're going to have a big happy family. She has all of these fantasies and images in her head about her big day is going to come when she's going to get married. And most marriage ceremonies, they make a big production out of it. It's a huge deal for her. Then she hooks up with somebody who's low in social and emotional needs. But, you are very task-oriented. I'm not saying that you don't do anything. You're very task-oriented, and you like to do things for her. But anyway, she marries somebody on the autism spectrum. She's not getting the emotional reciprocity that she had imagined in her fantasy. And so, as sarcastic as this sounds, and this probably is the case with your wife, she feels kind of ripped off. It's like, I got tricked. I got fooled. I've been cheated out of my dream. This is not what I signed up for. This is not at all what I was expecting as a 16-year-old girl that was already looking forward to someday, having a family and whatnot. You weren't having that thought at 16 years old. You didn't have the thought one time, gosh, I cannot wait to get married and have kids. I'm really looking forward to that day. You never had that thought at all. You're more concerned maybe with playing your games or some kind of special interest thing. So in summary, she feels like her dreams have been stolen, and she feels like she's at the wrong movie. And she has been trying to correct your ass for how many years? But she's going around about it in a way that is making it worse. And in some cases, she, the NT, has become his number one source of anxiety. And I have lost track of the number of guys who have come right out and said, I'm afraid of her. I'm literally afraid of her. It seems like I'm always in trouble. I'm always concerned that what I say or do is going to put me back in the doghouse again. And so he's walking around on thin ice most of the time. And her message delivery, being the stress-inducing delivery that it is, causes you to do some version of meltdown or shutdown or false agreement where you just go along with whatever she says just for him to get the conversation over with. I don't think her intentions were malicious. Her motives were pure for the most part. She was doing the best that she knew how to do at the time to get you to have that emotional reciprocity and intimacy and validate her feelings and yada, yada, yada. So I'm not saying that she's your enemy. In fact, I'm saying the opposite. She is not your enemy. But sometimes, if you want to be honest with yourself, it feels as if she is. She's wired the way that she is. You're wired the way that you are. But we do need to work on some things. So just because nobody, well, not that you never did anything wrong. There's times when you purposely were trying to be a dick. But I'm saying the other 80% of the stuff that she has made false assumptions about have been about the traits of the disorder. But just because you may have some traits of the disorder or condition, that doesn't give you a license to just say, and I know you wouldn't do this, it doesn't give you a license to say, well, that's just the way I'm wired, and you're just, that's just how I am. So if I have these meltdowns, well, that's, you're just going to have to live with it. We know that we're not saying that. There's still things that can be done.
If you are in a neurodiverse marriage where one spouse is autistic and the other one is not, and you've been struggling for years and years, and you're kind of sick and tired of the routine, talk to me. Use me as your personal coach. I have groups, and I keep these groups small so that you can get a lot of one-on-one attention. I have 3 Q&A groups, one for ASD husbands, one for neurotypical wives, and I have a couples group where both spouses can attend. I also have 2 instructional groups, Cassandra Syndrome Recovery Group, to help you cultivate some strategies to recover from years of emotional deprivation, and the Men's Masterclass, in which we take a deep dive on developing social skills and emotional literacy in the context of the neurodiverse marriage. We meet 1 hour a week for 4 weeks. So how much longer are you willing to wait?
Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, it'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you.